'Tis the season for fraud, and unfortunately, I done been hit. I didn't post earlier because it was still unclear what's going on, but yeah. I got an email that indicated, a relatively huge, from my point of view, PayPal charge that came from eBay. I look at it, it's being delivered to somebody I don't know, it says very obviously, and I had done, nothing particular that would have opened me up to that kind of situation that I'm aware of. And there's actually a warning here about what you should and should not do. One that I was aware of, but I'm not always the most careful person. So, anyway, the charge shows up. As soon as I see it in my email, which is like within 30 minutes of it showing up, I was lucky to have, sometimes I go kind of dark and don't end up checking my email for a few days. Sometimes there's shit like my power goes out and I don't manage to see it for over a week. That could have happened. But anyway, I contact PayPal almost immediately. And the reaction they give me is, okay, well, we can't just stop it, but we'll contact the seller. Well, the seller in this case is actually eBay. And clearly, they're in a weird situation, of course, in multiple layers, one of which is they're not the actual person selling the object, so they can't tell where it is in the supply chain or whatever. Conceivably, the sales could have been put, the label could have been paid for, and these are almost never sent out. But again, you don't know the size of the organization or whatever that's dealing with it. And also, eBay itself probably isn't that concerned, right? They don't make money if they stop this. So they're not going to be in any rush to try to get a human on the phone with someone at the company or anything like that. Everybody's best interest is to let the fraud go through, except mine, of course. PayPal doesn't care. They get a commission on charging me. eBay doesn't care. They get a commission on their sales. Neither of them are really directly involved in the fraud, and they're not going to take a big reputational impact from this. It's baked into what they are, right? Whatever company sold this, they might actually be involved in it. There are different ways that this fraud could happen. What I think happened is I think that there was a hack, not of me, but of a company that I do business with. And again, I've got no way to prove that, but it seems unlikely that anyone could have obtained the information off my computer, right? Off of my actions. Now, there are ways you can get that kind of access. Again, I don't know how PayPal stores its information in the browser or whatever, if particularly sensitive information is there. If it is, there is a problem, and PayPal in a way is responsible for storing that secure information only in the browser level, right? But otherwise, that information, and again, I wasn't interacting with the PayPal site. I hadn't done so in any way for over, for like a couple weeks, I think, or for over a week. I ordered some tobacco, right? Now, the company that I ordered tobacco from is kind of iffy, and it is quite possible they could have been hacked. It's also quite possible either PayPal or eBay was hacked, and there might be no knowledge of this stuff, right? Yes, there was a big PayPal hack a couple of years ago where all kind of this information came out, and that's what I'm kind of hoping for, is that it was somebody big enough that it can get caught, and that, like, maybe I can get my money back from that. The warning here is, do not link a bank account to PayPal. Just don't do it. Certainly don't make it your primary charge. You want to have your primary charge be a credit card. And that was the case for me for, maybe the first, I don't know how many years that I was using PayPal. But slowly over time, I got to trust the company more, because nothing was going bad. There were no weird charges or anything like that that I had to, that I would have to dispute. And my bank gives me a little bonus for each transaction that I make. If I made enough, and it actually doesn't anymore, but it did. If I made enough transactions, it ended up clearing my fee for the month, which was particularly useful. So I said, screw it, I'm making a fair amount of PayPal purchases. This was back when I was buying a lot of games used, and I switched over what my primary was. Now, since then, I almost never use PayPal, but I didn't think to reverse that. And here's the thing. If you get a credit card charge and you dispute it, I don't care what the hell happens, it can get cleared. But if you get an ACH transfer and you basically have no dispute for it, once it's made, that's your money. You just passed money. And putting that on an electronic tripwire is a horrible idea. I tend to avoid automatic payment situations, stuff like that. I tend to try to put everything in so that, I'm manually watching everything as it goes. But then we get to more problems, right? Like I said, PayPal, they're structured, eBay is structured so that they don't really want to stop this fraud. It's money going into their pocket. It really is. And of course, they pay lots of money to prevent any kind of regulations for them to, make additional checks, whatever. The particular charge was just under $1,000. I think, that's purposeful, because probably at $1,000, there's probably a trigger wire is tripped. And, since it's being sent to someone who's not the account holder, blah, 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 additional checks would be made. But, yeah, one of the things is who's doing the fraud, actually. And this is where things get kind of fuzzy. I mean, look, obviously, like I said, PayPal and eBay are complicit in this, right? By not putting these stops in there. But the fraud is probably being done offshore. The actual criminal here, the person who's really making the money off of it. The person who's getting sent, who's getting sent the order, they probably don't really know what they're doing. Now, if they did know what they were doing, they're fucking trivial to trace, right? I mean, I'm going to be launching, reporting a fraud thing through my bank, and it's going to get investigated. But they probably won't pay any price unless they've been warned on these before. Because what I'm guessing is happening, there's a couple of different ways that this can play out. It could have played out in terms of how they get some dupe to make an order for me. One is that they essentially kind of hire people to purchase goods and return them. Now, there are ways this is kind of done. Or not return them, but return them to, because if there's a fraud report out on something and it gets returned, I think the money could be recouped that way. No, return the expensive, relatively resellable item to someplace where that money will get back to the actual source of the fraud. So they actually hire these dupes, and I call them that, but they're not really dupes. They're getting a too good to be true business opportunity type of thing. You see ads for this on we won't get into, just like eBay and Facebook are complicit in fraud. I'm sorry, eBay and PayPal. Facebook is as well, if you take a look at the ads that they allow through and whatnot. And the way that, if you put a complaint on an ad saying this is bullshit, they're just yeah, I don't know that. In a lot of ways, the big interwebs companies are all reliant on a certain degree of fraud for their economy. But anyhow, so I ended up the second thing that could happen is the fraud is a seller. Okay? This is a little bit more dangerous. I don't know. They're both kind of dangerous for the fraudster, right? But they put layers in between. They don't have to make, if they make 10% of what they steal, that's pretty good. Because they're relying on, quantity of these succeeding. And, there can be a lot of failures and whatnot. They can have a lot of different dupes out there to work from. But the second way is that they kind of operate the seller side of things. And what they do is, one option is that the seller itself presents a false interface that charges me. That's kind of dumb. That's probably not what they're doing. Another is that the seller works out again with a dupe. And this is where the dupe is probably less likely to have a suspicion of, look, we're testing out this situation. We want you to click this purchase thing, and then you return it when you get it. And the actual object isn't going to be worth anywhere near what it is. And then they pay a small amount of money to this person for each item that they deal with. A few bucks, honestly. Because they're just trying to put it out as if they're, testing their returns process and all that. And that all sounds very unfishy, to tell you the truth, as opposed to the, we want you to order this and then send it to this person, and we're just doing a transshipment type thing, and you'll get a good cut out of it. And that's really, we're giving you a good cut. Now, don't ask any questions. Don't think about it too hard. But that's kind of where I'm looking at the, yeah, you know, and then with the layering and everything, it'll become very, very hard to actually prosecute or get a hold of any of these things, because the entity that the dupe is dealing with, probably that next layer, is sitting in some non-prosecutable area that, you know, that they may even be able to keep going with that same company for you know, after being caught a few times. Eventually those companies will be shut down, but more will spring up. The reality is, look, you know, if people really wanted to crack down on this shit, sellers from countries that are non-prosecutable would not be easily allowed and whatever. That would trigger additional layers of warning on eBay and on PayPal, which would put a hold on the order so that fraud couldn't be committed. But they're not interested in that. Again, their money is in allowing these to go through. And it doesn't really hurt their reputation. Anyhow, long story short, it is quite possible that as long as you have an ACH connection to your payments, that you will be defrauded through nothing else that you've done. Okay? As long as that's how you're doing it. As long as you've got it connected directly to your bank. Let me swap batteries and I'll get to more of this story. This is, somebody mentioned they liked my lovely Christmas Eve story, you know, so here's another lovely Christmassy story, because this really is the season of fraud. This is when it hits its heaviest. So now we come to the where I curse myself and who I am and what I did do wrong. Again, I don't think I did. My internet hygiene isn't great. None of my hygiene is. But I'm having a difficult time seeing that unless eBay, they would be the ones in trouble. No, unless PayPal is inserting information that allows a transfer into my browser that persists and is accessible. And again, that should not be allowed, right? I don't know if it is. And here's the thing, even if there's like restrictions against it and whatever, it would kind of require a class action suit to do something about it. And again, I'm not getting my money back. That's pretty fucking clear at this point. But I don't see an easy way that I was responsible, that it happened on my local end. So I think what happened is that information gets stored with any company that you trust to make, you know, to allow for PayPal payments with. If you make a PayPal payment, you know, you click that pay with PayPal little button on it. And unless there was a mass release, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. But my assumption is that one of those companies that I clicked that little button on got hacked and may be completely unaware of it. Quite often, data exposures are not discovered for a long time, if at all. Which is another thing. It's like, you know, somebody defrauded me. I've got one hook towards that, but you know what I don't have? You know, that hook probably is an innocent dupe. Otherwise, he's a fucking idiot because he's going to jail, you know, if he's the one who's collecting the money and not transshipping or something like that. And of course, it's a Florida man. the the other. Now, I'm trying to think what I don't even remember what I was saying. Yeah, I don't remember where I was going with this. Not surprising. So the part that's horrible for me is, again, I was awake when the email came in and ended up checking it fairly soon after. I get in contact with PayPal right away. Again, they're not really set up to try to put skids on any of those payments. They want them to go through as smoothly and as easily as possible and to collect their money on it. So they say, yes, we'll contact the seller, in this case, eBay. And of course, eBay is also not set up to try to protect and prevent fraud particularly. So there's no kind of, hey, put the alerts on, there's, a charge going through. There's nothing like that, right? Some companies might try to protect their reputation more and try to prevent themselves from being a hotbed of fraud, but there's no real incentive for PayPal or for eBay. And they probably started saying, yeah, the reputational cost of being defrauded, it's been a couple of years since we had that data breach, and people are still using us. It's not really hurting us that much. So, even if there had been, and they were more secure just like a year ago, I can actually access my account now, which I couldn't do before, without anything changing on my end. So they've changed something on their end. Now they may have been sued, forcing them to allow access, because otherwise it's problematic. But anyway, and my account was actually less secure before, less secure when I couldn't access it. I wouldn't have even been able to make this complaint without jumping through additional hoops that made my account less secure. So, for me, I contact PayPal relatively quickly. I get the answer that's like, you're probably screwed. They don't say it like that, but it's like, okay, great. You've sent me something and you could stop that payment, but no, you're not going to. You're going to ask the seller if they want to, and the seller clearly doesn't give a shit either. So I contact my bank, and I get on the chat with an assistant from the bank. I'm trying to think. I know I phoned someone. I was trying to phone eBay. You absolutely cannot get through to eBay. There is no way to put a complaint unless, you bought something. If you tried to buy something and you have it in your history and whatnot, there is just nothing. I call their phone number and it's like this automated thing, and it has no fraud part to it at all. And they wouldn't take the ID number that they presented me with. So there's a serious problem there. Well, not they presented me with, the PayPal presented me with, which may have been a PayPal-based thing, but they didn't recognize it, so I don't know. It really was just a GUI, a GUID, GUID, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But my bank comes back with the answer of, look, if it's an ACH, if it was a debit card payment or and certainly a credit payment or whatever, they could actually have stopped it. If it's an ACH payment, I can put a stop payment in for $35. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like a deal, given the charge that I'm being made anyway. I put a stop payment on a check that probably nobody could have cashed for, I don't know, a lot less than that. For like $600 or so for my roof cleaning, when that didn't get through. I was a little iffy about that because I think it probably just got lost in the mail. But anyway, yeah, I could put the stop payment on. Sounds like a good idea. But that would only count if the electronic transfer happened after 3 business days. They have 3 business days to do this. Now, I hear that and I'm like, well, obviously it's going to go through immediately, you know. Well, the charge didn't go through, or I didn't notice it. I've been checking my bank every so often. The charge didn't actually go through to the bank until sometime today. And, okay, it still would have been within the 3 days, so I wouldn't have avoided paying, right? So I go to the secure forms section because I'm told there's a fraud form there that I have to fill out if it goes, if it goes through. And I can't find the fraud form. I asked for that via email, but I found the payment stop form, and the wording on that was significantly different from what the person who was helping me said. Within 3 days is guaranteed, but it might have gone through and stopped it anyhow. Had I known there was any chance that it would go through and stop it, I would have put that $35 down. Because obviously, I mean, you could figure out your odds or whatever, and it probably comes to somewhere around 5% is where you'd want to invest that $35, right? 3.5%. That would be the break even. But anyway, I definitely would have done it because the $35 is really meaningless. I would have kind of cursed myself in this whole process about costing me $35 because I don't like that. But no, because of what the chat said, and I didn't go look up this form at that point. So all I've been doing is kind of, with regards to this, is kind of checking my bank thing and seeing if the charge goes through. And I was very happy because it didn't go through for a couple of days. And I thought, that's cool. Maybe PayPal actually managed to stop this, despite how they made it sound. And the answer is no. It went through. And I mean, look, I was asleep most of the day. I could have gone through in the morning, whatever. But it took long enough. Like, I thought these went through like that, right? I thought payment charges would go through within a few hours. But it may have been a batch overnight process. I don't know. I've lost track of time, but I think it's been, I don't know. Yeah, I could look back and see when I announced on Facebook that I had been hacked. But so I end up cursing myself for, I tried to interact with this chat person. I tried to get it clear from them. I mean, they said, well, if you want to do the $35 stop. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really make, I actually responded with, well, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, an electronic transfer is going to happen quicker than 3 days. They're going to make their request in less than 3 days. And that was indeed the truth. And she didn't come back with anything like, well, it's possible it might stop it anyhow. That's just our assurances or anything like that. So I'm kind of pissed, and I would go back now. I gave her a fair response with, yeah, she was fine, but I didn't like the answer she gave me, but that's just bank policy. That they don't, try to hurry up and enter in a block right away, that then instead they apparently, like, process these things in a large batch or something, right? Probably overnight, the same way they do the payments. They process the stop orders, very, very slowly. Now, not just overnight, but it won't go into effect until 3 days later. Now, the way it's worded on the form was it'll happen within 3 days or within a reasonable amount of time, which really leaves me with like, what the fuck kind of like, what are you on the hook for, bank? But anyway, what you'd expect, what would have happened back in my day, what would have happened in the days of like, real humans dealing. Of course, we weren't dealing with ACH transfers then. You're talking about check stops, and those will just work. You'd go in, somebody would actually enter it into the computer that it stopped right in front of you. It wouldn't be like stacked up to be bulk processed the way the actual payments would be. Which kind of pisses me off, but, progress and all that. So, yes, I could have been more diligent and looked to see if I was lied to by this, agent on the chat. I had no reason to believe that. I thought I was just screwed, unless it took more than 3 days from the time of my complaint, by the way, which was a couple hours after I got, tried dealing with PayPal and eBay. Just because it was taking me so long to get through with this stuff. And so I had a happy check, I was checking my bank account regularly, maybe every couple hours or something, and seeing nothing's been withdrawn, really hoping that, but then tonight, it was dinged. And again, chances are that $35 would have just been more wasted money. How do I feel about all this? This is the thing. The biggest, look, I understand if losing $1,000 can be pretty fucking bad. There's no question about that. I'm a person who doesn't have health insurance because I'm too cheap to pay for it, right? I'm a person who tends not to buy anything because I'm too fucking cheap. The idea of $1,000 purchase to me, what cost me $1,000 that I bought recently? Well, my sex doll. And I'm okay with that, but I don't think it was a good buy. A good computer. My wife's gaming computer was about $1,000 at the time. May have gone up. That's fine, but there's sales and stuff. I'd expect to spend about that at this point. Although I think the highest I've spent is about $500. And when I had a car, the repairs on the car before I crashed it were about $1,000, and then the car itself was about $1,000. So that's the kind of thing, the kind of big thing that I look at as costing that kind of money. And it's not something I buy very often. We're talking what? 4 such expenditures, and then again, I've spent more than that, like buying a house or something, but 4 such expenditures in that range in the course of 15 years. And if I go further than that, it's even harder. I'm not sure I ever spent $1,000 on anything of that nature, right? I'm thinking back. But of course, $1,000 was worth more back then. But yeah, so in my life, I've maybe made 4 expenditures equivalent to what this piece of fraud cost me. And okay, I'm not going to count things like property taxes, medical expenses. You could throw that in. When I had my operation, because I was like near death and whatnot. Um, I think that ended up costing me out of pocket about 5,000. If you added up like dental costs over the course of a year, it would go over 1,000 back when I had insurance. Now I just don't bother. I'm letting the fuckers rot in my mouth. Like I said, not good hygiene. But yeah, so for me, this is like an amount of money that emotionally is just crippling to realize that was stolen from me. But then when I look at the bigger picture of things, it's not going to make a damn bit of difference. I'm still going to have to withdraw money, from the stock market or whatever, relatively soon. I want to do it before this tax year ends, just to spread out, so that I'm not having to pay anything. Because the total amount of money that I have available in my bank account at this point is getting to about what I spend in a year. So, I should probably pull out money. That terrifies me. I've never tried it before. I've never tried to sell, some of my funds. So anything new like that. Some of me is just like really pissed at myself for not disbelieving the chat person and, just saying, look, there's a chance. But yeah, I mean, I even gave her an opportunity to respond by giving my reasoning there. Unfortunately, they're probably trained not to give answers that aren't in their script, no matter what. Might have been easier over the phone. People tend to be looser over the phone for whatever reason. But, my conditions make it so that I really, really don't want to talk on the phone, even to an automated thing. And then, so yeah, I look at it and I'm like, the actual impact of this is essentially nothing to me. I'm that fortunate at this point. Yeah, it's an amount of money that emotionally I'm devastated by having been scammed out of it. But it also isn't going to really impact my life in any significant way. The amounts that it costs to live, it's just not going to impact things like it once would have. It definitely once would have. So at that point, my best response becomes kind of forget about it, because that's the best thing about it. That's otherwise I'm just going to be gnawed at by it. And the truth of the matter is, although it's an amount of money that emotionally affects me heavily, I consider it in comparison to like things like that I should would easily be able to replace with a tiny fraction of that money. I think about things that I've lost, some of which have some emotional value in and of themselves. So those kind of are harder to count. But things that really shouldn't have much emotional value, like a silk scarf, that I just wouldn't replace, etc. But I feel the impact of that not being in my hands, in my possession anymore. The bandana that I lost. I mean, honestly, all this shit, that it has no emotional impact to me, but I need it sometimes, and I don't have one. And I don't need it sometimes enough to order it online or anything like that. In fact, I don't it's pretty damn fucking hard for me to order stuff in general. My tobacco, obviously, but like clothing or whatever, I just end up, I don't know, too many times it ends up not being really what I thought it would be. I want to see the stuff right in front of me when I buy it. And I get an incorrect view. I did buy a space heater and a switch. Something else. I don't know what this something else is. And they just came today, which is good. But, you know. Ah. So yeah, I mean, there are things that impact my life that I will not replace because I'm cheap or whatever, in a way that this money, which is more valuable than what, more money than I would have spent by far on replacing all of the things I've lost or whatever, basically, will impact my existence. Like, with the mortgage and everything, I figured I'm spending about 30K a year, and losing 1/30th of that of the yearly cost is just not that important. But here's the thing, like, this isn't my decision, right? So this is kind of like going on a work trip and being willing to spend money differently than I would at home, just changing my perspective and whatnot on that kind of thing. So to some extent, yeah, I just do have to just let it go. I will file the fraud report. I'll hope something comes of it. I know I'm not going to see money, but I hope somebody, something gets closed down or something and it gets a little harder for someone. But overall, the flaw is kind of, again, it's like in the intersection between the business and the government, right? The businesses only do as much as the government forces them to do to prevent fraud. And fraud is actually good for them, so they don't want to stop it. And it's so good for them that they're willing to lobby the government to prevent them from having to take steps that would make fraud a little bit harder. It's just really pathetic when you think about it, isn't it? There's something so fucking wrong with our whole system. Like, you kind of don't feel like it was this way. I don't know, 70 years ago. I was going to say 50, but I can remember 50 years ago. Well, close enough to that. And I can remember a lot of the sort of bureaucratic bullshit. I'm sorry, we can't help you with that. Maybe it's always been there. Maybe it's just baked into that capitalist sense. And I mean, it's going to show up anywhere, right? All I can do is hope that I'm gone soon. All right, cheers.